Welcome to Peace Stories. Tonight I have a story for you that came to me in a rather unusual way. It's a tale that forced me to confront the deepest, darkest corners of the human heart, and it's one that comes with a solemn warning. Please engage your deepest wisdom as you listen, for this isn't just a strange story, it's a profound and disturbing journey into a family's hidden legacy, and it might just haunt your thoughts long after it's over. Our story begins in 1990, about 32 years ago from the time this account was first shared, and it revolves around a young man we shall call Keen, a pseudonym to protect his identity. Keen was just 19, a restless soul burdened by a childhood marked by sorrow and neglect. He lost his mother early in life, leaving him to be raised by a distant father who quickly remarried. His stepmother, unfortunately, was far from kind, often verbally abusing him, and his father, preoccupied with work, became even more remote. This harsh environment pushed Keen into rebellion. He dropped out after high school, drank, smoked, skipped classes, embodying the full bad boy persona of the era. He worked odd jobs, just enough to support himself and distance himself from a home that offered him little comfort. The breaking point arrived one evening when Keen, trying to show affection, brought home a bag of his father's favorite snacks. His stepmother, however, chose that moment to unleash a torrent of insults, ridiculing his meager earnings. This sparked a furious argument, unlike any before. What was truly surprising was his father's reaction. Instead of siding with his wife, as he usually did, he sent her away and calmly sat Keen down. For the first time, Keen found an ear, and he poured out his heart, ending with a desperate plea to leave home. His father, after a long sigh, looked through an old, small notebook and proposed an unexpected solution. "I'll send you to live with your grandfather," he said. Keen's grandfather, he was a wealthy man who owned a sprawling fruit orchard in another province. It was an offer of a fresh start, a chance to find work and build a life under the care of an elder. However, there was a catch. Keen had never met his grandfather. Furthermore, his father, citing urgent work, wouldn't accompany him. Instead, Keen was to travel alone, guided by Uncle Dom, a trusted relative and the grandfather's close associate. With $123 and a letter for his unseen grandfather, Keen reluctantly agreed. The day of departure was somber. His father stood at the gate, gripping Keen's shoulders, his face etched with an unusual sadness, but remaining silent. Keen, despite their distant relationship, felt a profound sense of loneliness as he left, catching a glimpse of his stepmother's smug, satisfied face watching from an upstairs window. His journey ended late in the afternoon, around 6 p.m., in the provincial town. Uncle Dom, a large, silent man, met him at the bus stop. The drive to the grandfather's estate was unsettling. As they left the town, the familiar sights of community faded into a desolate landscape of orchards and towering ancient trees. The light of dusk seemed to vanish, plunging them into an almost instant darkness for the final 2 kilometers. The grandfather's house was an imposing sight. It was a vast compound of multiple traditional Thai-style houses, clearly belonging to a family of immense wealth. But despite its grandeur, the atmosphere was thick with an unsettling gloom. There were few lights, and those that did exist were dim and spaced far apart, swallowed by the shadows of the immense old trees that surrounded the property.
As Kin stepped out of the car, his eyes met the figure of a woman standing silently at the foot of the main house's stairs. She was tall, elderly, dressed entirely in black, with long, stringy hair. This was the housekeeper. Uncle Dom spoke to her briefly, then motioned for Kin to follow. As Kin ascended the stairs, a jolt of pain shot through his foot. The wooden step was scorching hot, as if exposed to the midday sun, an impossible sensation in the evening darkness. He recoiled, then leaped over the spot, the inexplicable heat a prelude to the strangeness that awaited him. Inside, the house was just as dark as the outside, with housekeeper disappearing into the gloom. Kin felt an immediate sense of unease, a reluctance to proceed. Uncle Dom, however, led him to a raised wooden terrace where they sat. After a moment, a door creaked open in one of the dark rooms, and from its depths, a figure emerged, carrying an antique oil lamp. It was his grandfather. The sight of the grandfather was chilling. He was incredibly thin, almost skeletal, with sunken cheeks and a bald head covered in elaborate tattoos and markings that stretched across his face, arms, and shoulders. Yet, despite his frail appearance, his movements were surprisingly agile and strong. His eyes, however, held the most power. His gaze was so intense, so penetrating, that Kin felt frozen, paralyzed with fear. The grandfather barely looked at Kin before turning his back and instructing Uncle Dom to bring the target to him. Kin followed Uncle Dom into the grandfather's dimly lit room, where housekeeper was slowly lighting more lamps, revealing a collection of ancient, unsettling objects. Antique wooden furniture, swords, and framed pictures. The grandfather settled into a central chair, and Kin, overwhelmed, quickly offered a respectful. The grandfather stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment, then suddenly chuckled. "So, you're my son's boy," he said. He then began to pepper Kin with questions about his birth date and time, which Kin could only partially answer. Then a chilling sound shattered the quiet, a deep, guttural growl like a wild beast resonating from somewhere unseen. Uncle Dom looked visibly shaken, his palms sweating. Uncle Dom quickly changed the subject, suggesting Kin work in the office packing fruit. The grandfather agreed, setting 2 strict rules for Kin's stay. 1. Never eat any food or use any utensils from the house itself. Kin would eat with Uncle Dom during the day, and a girl would deliver his evening and weekend meals. 2. Never, under any circumstances, go under the house. Under the house in Thai, it refers to the space beneath traditional raised Thai houses, often used for storage, shelter for animals, or even as a cool, airy living area. It's a common feature of old Thai homes, especially in rural areas. Kin could only nod in agreement. The grandfather then dismissed them, saying he needed rest. Housekeeper led him to his room, which, while spacious and well-furnished, had no television or amenities, but he was too tired to care, and fell asleep easily.
For the first few days, Kin settled into a routine. He worked diligently at the fruit-packing office, counting stock, a job that Uncle Dom assured him was simple and safe. When Kin asked about the strange rules, Uncle Dom explained that the food restriction was due to the grandfather's strict diet for his age, and the forbidden area under the house was a feng shui area to protect the family's wealth. Uncle Dom dismissed any deeper concerns, telling Kin to focus on his work. In the evenings, Uncle Dom would drop Kin at the entrance to the property. Around 7 p.m., a young girl, Yam, would appear at the gate holding a bag of food. Yam was 17, pretty and cheerful. She delivered Kin's meals, always with a bright smile, and he found himself enjoying their brief interactions. However, the strange occurrences continued. One evening, Kin saw his grandfather in the garden, muttering something like 6, 6, and seemingly gnawing on something. That night, Kin woke to the terrifying sound of loud, drawn-out growls like a lion or tiger circling just outside his room door. He felt it was some form of initiation, a hazing, and simply huddled under his blanket until he fell asleep. The next morning, he dismissed it as a dream when Uncle Dom asked if he slept well.
The following day, after work, Kin again met Yem. He learned her name and that she was the daughter of the local rice shop owner. He tried to chat casually, but when he told her he was working at the house, Yem's cheerful demeanor instantly vanished. She stared at him, then at the house, hugging herself tightly. "It's scary to death in there. I wouldn't dare go inside," she whispered. Before she could explain, housekeeper's voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air, calling Yem back to the house. Yem visibly flinched, stuttering nervously. Kin tried to make a light-hearted excuse for Yem staying late, but housekeeper merely warned Yem that it was dark and dangerous to be out alone. As Yem hurried away, housekeeper pointed to a dead dog carcass recently hit by a car, lying less than 10 meters from the house's entrance. She warned Yem to be careful, then fixed her gaze on the decaying animal, staring intently. Back inside, Kin again saw his grandfather, this time chewing on a fresh, sticky, vine-like substance that seemed to be covered in hair. The image, combined with Yem's fear and housekeeper's strange behavior, left Kin deeply disturbed and unable to sleep. Later that night, he heard the large gate open and a vehicle enter. Peeking through his window, he saw workers unloading large sacks of fresh, red raw meat and carrying it into the grandfather's private quarters. He felt an increasing sense of dread, a desperate desire to leave, but he was trapped. A sudden urgent need to use the restroom, located in a separate part of the house, forced him to brave the darkness. As he finished, the familiar, terrifying growling sound began again, closer this time. He hid in the bathroom, peering through a crack in the door. What he saw next was truly horrifying. A pair of small, female feet in traditional Thai garb passed by, followed by a long, trailing rope. He followed the form upwards, a bare torso, but no head. As he stared in petrified shock, he felt a breath on his neck. A female voice whispered, "Hey, fresh meat for the grandfather." And then a severed woman's head swung down, dangling directly in front of his face. Kin fainted. He woke up in his room, the grandfather leaning over him, offering smelling salts. Kin recounted his terrifying experience, but the grandfather simply brushed it off. "It's just an old house," he said, before offering to let Kin go into town with Uncle Dom for the day. The casual dismissal, however, served only to confirm to Kin that his visions were real. Later that day, Kin saw housekeeper again, carrying a tray, but instead of food, the tray was filled with red, dripping blood. He ran to Uncle Dom, demanding to be taken to town. Even in town, he couldn't find peace, knowing what awaited him back at the house. That evening, as he walked back from the main road, the moonlight revealed a horrific sight. In the middle of the entrance path, a figure was hunched over the spot where the dead dog lay, emitting a foul odor. It was housekeeper. She straightened up, holding the dog's mangled carcass, her face smeared with blood. Kin, horrified, instinctively ducked behind a tree, only to bump into Yam, who was also hiding and silently weeping. Both watched in terrified silence as housekeeper, her eyes fixed on them, stumbled away and vanished into the darkness. Uncle Dom arrived shortly after, and seeing their terror, quickly ushered Kin into the house while promising to take Yam home. Kin rushed inside, desperate to get away from the horrors outside, foregoing dinner. As he tried to calm himself, the floor of the house, particularly the terrace, became unbearably hot, burning his bare feet. Then, the loud, primal roars of a wild animal erupted from the grandfather's room. Kin quickly darted into the bathroom for safety. From his hiding spot, he watched as the grandfather burst out, his eyes bloodshot, still chewing on raw meat, pacing wildly and erratically.
That night, unable to sleep, he heard the grandfather's booming voice chanting prayers all night long. He decided then and there he had to escape. As he packed his meager belongings, his hand brushed against the letter his father had given him. Curiosity overriding his fear, he tore it open. The words within chilled him to the core, confirming his deepest fear. "I brought it for you. Eat it." His father had intended him as a sacrifice.
The realization crushed him. He spent the next day in a daze, going to work mechanically. When Uncle Dom asked if he was okay, Kin simply said, "I'm fine." His trust shattered, especially towards Uncle Dom, who had seemingly known all along. That evening, Yam arrived with his food, but her usual cheer was gone. She was pale and mournful. She silently handed him the bag and turned to leave. As she did, Kin accidentally dropped his notebook. Bending to pick it up, he caught a glimpse of something horrific. Yam's body was visibly broken, twisted, and covered in blood. He fell back in shock. When he looked again, Yam's was gone, but his grandfather was standing there, watching him, looking taller and more imposing than ever. The house then fell into an unnerving silence. The housekeeper and the other workers were nowhere to be seen. Kin knew he couldn't stay another moment. He forced himself to stay awake, waiting for the growling to start, but it never did. Around 2 or 3 a.m., he cautiously opened his door and bolted. As he ran down the stairs, he heard heavy footsteps and animal growls coming from under the house. Desperate, he forgot the grandfather's strict rule and dove under the house for cover. The moment he touched the ground, a searing heat enveloped him, as if he were being scalded by fire. The ground itself seemed to writhe, and black smoke billowed upwards. Kin felt his strength draining away, his energy being siphoned from him. The grandfather's roars echoed around him, growing louder, more menacing. He didn't know how, but he found himself running, sprinting away from the house. He ran into the road, almost hit by a car. It was Uncle Dom. Kin, still terrified and mistrustful, tried to run again, but Uncle Dom grabbed him, pulling him into the car. Uncle Dom drove him to a quiet noodle shop, where Kin finally broke down, weeping uncontrollably. "Calm down," Uncle Dom said. "I'll tell you everything." He then revealed the horrifying truth. The grandfather wasn't the ultimate threat to Kin. He would never harm his own kin. It was Kin's father who was truly dangerous. His father had hired Uncle Dom to betray the grandfather after Kin was devoured, suggesting a dark scheme, perhaps to claim the inheritance. Uncle Dom, raised by the grandfather, couldn't bring himself to do it. The true horror lay beneath the house. It was an ancient, powerful, cursed artifact. Its origin was steeped in a bloody history. During a time of dynastic change, a royal from the ancient Khmer kingdom sacrificed their spirit to become this artifact. This curse, Uncle Dom explained, reached its peak power every 223 years. Its past manifestations were catastrophic. The last time it was disturbed in 1767, it coincided with the fall of Ayutthaya to the Burmese. Another time, it cursed an Isan prince to die mysterious deaths for 7 generations. The grandfather's family were its guardians. Their ancestors were tasked with controlling this malevolent force. And the current cycle, 1767 plus 223 years, brought them to 1990, the very year of Kin's arrival. The curse was at its most potent. Panic-stricken, Kin asked what they could do. Uncle Dom drove them back to the house. There, they found the grandfather's body, terribly burned and blackened, as if fire had erupted from beneath him. As they watched in horror, a woman in ancient, full traditional attire with red cloth tied around her appeared.
She was drawing black, smoky energy from the grandfather's lifeless body, pulling it upwards and releasing it into the sky, where it slowly dissipated. The grandfather then miraculously stirred, speaking weakly. He explained that his family had inherited the duty to control the curse. He had learned dark, forbidden magic to become like a tiger, to contain the spirits and the artifact. He confessed that he knew Kin was meant to be the sacrifice, but when he saw his grandson, he couldn't go through with it, unable to kill one of his own flesh and blood. Instead, he had sacrificed himself, using his own life force to weaken the curse. He also mentioned that he was lucky, as an amulet from King Narai's era, imbued with the spirits of those who had fought against the curse, had intervened and helped him. This powerful amulet, Kin realized, was likely the one his father had given him. Tears streamed down the grandfather's face as he murmured about his own son, Kin's father, who would perform such a cruel act, even attempting to kill his own father. He whispered, "It's all right. I forgive him. I can finally rest." Then he fell silent, passing away. Less than an hour later, news spread of a massive gas truck explosion on road, claiming many lives. Among the casualties were Kin's father and his stepmother. Was it coincidence? Or was it the karmic retribution for their greed and wickedness? The sources leave this open to interpretation. This deeply unsettling story, however, doesn't end there for Kin. Before this account was shared, Kin took his own life. The traumatic events at his grandfather's house, the betrayal, and the horrifying truth he uncovered left him so deeply scarred that he could never live a normal life or even contemplate having a family. His trauma persisted for decades, breaking his spirit. Of all the characters in this tale, the father, the stepmother, the grandfather, housekeeper, and Yam, only Uncle Dom's fate remains unknown. As you reflect on this story, consider its core message, one that the original storyteller emphasized. There is nothing more terrifying than the human heart. The father's desire for what he thought was wealth, possibly believing the artifact was merely a valuable treasure, led him to attempt to sacrifice his own son and betray his own father. This story isn't just about ancient curses or vengeful spirits. It's a grim reminder of the destructive power of human greed and depravity, a power far more frightening than any ghost. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this journey into the supernatural, please consider showing your support. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these fascinating stories.